Rico, that is a colony of the U.S. imperialism in the Caribbean. Well, first of all, we have a short time. The teachers in Puerto Rico are very similar to the teachers in U.S. What we do there in our island can be do it here. And maybe sometimes the teachers from LA, Chicago, New York, Arkansas are more different than the teachers from New York and Puerto Rico. As a colony, we fight against no child left behind, against charter schools, against vouchers, against the school transformations, all that things rise to the top is the same. But our teachers are not worse or they are not better than the teachers here. We have a different history. But the history, our history, was developed by nosotros mismos, by ourselves. And that is very important because we can change the things that we have lived for many years. Okay, union transformation. Federación de Maestros de Puerto Rico, Teachers Federation of Teachers, was a very bureaucratic, corrupt union of AFT. That is the reality, very corrupt. And we changed that. We disaffiliate from American Federation of Teachers in 2005. We were the second largest local AFT and the only one that can disaffiliate in all of his history until I know. And that was very important because, you know, in that struggle we have to fight against the trusteeship. And when we won, that was extraordinary because for the first time in our life, we can, we can control our future. We can control our organization. Okay, but when you want to transform a union, you want to do many other things. But you have a key problem that you have to take a position around that problem. You have to decide if you will be a loyal opposition or if you will not be a loyal opposition of the capitalism system. And that is a major issue because if you want to develop the real power of the working class, and teachers are part of the working class, you have to struggle against not only your boss, not only the government, you have to struggle against the ideology of the ruling class in our own fight, rising fight. And always it's very important to say that we are very hard against all the corrupt leadership of IFLSEO and Change to Win. But most of them in the beginning were people as us, fighting for transformation of his own union. But in the process, they decide to be a loyal opposition, and in a long time, every loyal opposition ends in a corrupt leadership, because that is the mechanism of these business unions. Remember, from the point of view of the leaders, you can talk around that unions as union that functions as a business. From the point of view of his members, they think that the union is like a bad insurance company. And we have to fight against that. We want to develop a union that is very important, is part of the life of the workers. How we do that? Well, in 2003, we came to the direction of the union. We won most of the positions of the executive committee of our union, but that was the product of a long process of a struggle in our schools, because we need to develop real power to change the union. We have experience in Puerto Rico of some opposition groups that go to the executive committee of our union, and some of them were crushed by machine of the union, and others that don't want to be crushed made some, how do you say, compromises. And at the end, they came to be the same thing. You need to develop the real power, and the real power, we develop that real power in a very simple form. First of all, we have to develop an ideology as working class, and we have to debate that inside our union. You can be socialist, you can maybe not, you are not a socialist. Most of teachers in Puerto Rico, they are not socialists, but they think that they are part of the working class and that they have to transform the oppression that they live in the schools. And that is important. That is a big, big victory. And the government can do anything, but that is in the minds of the person, and that is extraordinary. Second, you have to develop a real democracy inside the union. For us, democracy is not to vote. To take a vote and put in a vote, that is not democracy. For us, it's the real control of the process. Is to have the knowledge and also the mechanism to control your process. I have a short time. I want to say something, otra cosa. In this process, we need ideology, we need a real empowerment of the workers. The union have to support all this struggle in the base of the unions, in the schools. Also, we don't make concessions. We don't have secrets. Sometimes you struggle and you don't win everything that you want. But if you struggle and don't win everything, that's okay, the next time, in the next round. But if you as a leader think that battle we must not have in this moment, you are in the wrong way. As a leader, we don't decide if some person will be fired or not fired. No, the people have to decide. If the people want to fight back, we will support them. So in the struggle is the method, is the mechanism to create the praxis necessary to develop the class conscience, and also to finish, we push for the ideology of the working class, a real democracy empowerment, a struggle from the bottom, no concession, no secret, a real struggle as a method, but also we think that we cannot limit our struggle of what the law says. This is a political conflict. It's an issue of power. And we as workers don't have to limit our struggle to the limit that the ruling class imposed to us. Finally, parents. We developed for many years a strong relation with parents and students. And I put this idea for future discussion. I have been in many places. We talk about parents, about teachers, but I don't listen to people talking around the political organization of the students in high school and middle schools. That is very important for our struggle and for the future of our struggle in all the countries. Thank you.
I wanted to talk about, just give you a bit of context to British Columbia, and then talk about 5 areas that we've focused on in the last decade. In 2001, we had a right-wing government elected in British Columbia. It's called the BC Liberal Party. In Canada, the Liberals are the right wing. And they, within a matter of months, brought in legislation to strip from our collective agreement all the provisions on class size, on class composition, and staffing formulas that we had negotiated over the previous dozen years. And they did that in order to chop the education budgets. And we lost 3,000 teachers out of 35,000 just overnight when that happened. So we just decided that that this was likely to be a long-term struggle, and so we developed a strategy that was initially a 5-year strategy for how we were going to try to regain the positions that we had lost, but also the labor rights that had been taken away in the course of this. And it wasn't only teachers, but also healthcare workers who faced that particular situation. For us, the key element in the first years was very much, as Rafael has mentioned, reaching out to the public, trying to get the public to understand that, and particularly parents in that public, what was happening. So we worked very hard at framing the issues around class size and class composition and special needs. We tracked what was going on. We've had 200 school closures in this last decade. We focused on the impact that closing schools has on the community, particularly in our province, which is at least 4 times larger than Great Britain, and has many very small communities. And the school is the central public institution in those communities. And you close the school, you close down the community in many ways. So we focused on all of that, and I'll just tell you about one particular thing we did, was the development of a charter for public education. We got together a group of people from the community and one from the union who traveled around our province and had open meetings for anyone who wanted to come and talk about education. They started by talking about the cuts and the problems that were there, but the commissioners said, no, we don't want to hear about those cuts. We know they're happening, we know that they're damaging, but really what we want to do is to hear what you would like education to be like. What should public education be like? And after they'd heard from hundreds of people around the province, they created a charter for public education. And it's essentially the dreams that the community has about what public education could be. And that then became an organizing tool for us, both in the process of building it and in pursuing it afterwards. I brought a few copies of the charter for you, to see that I'll put out later. So reaching to the public and framing the issues was number one. Secondly, we wanted to go into bargaining in 2005 to try to regain some of what we had lost. And the legislature simply passed a piece of legislation which ordered us back to work. We hadn't even gone on strike yet, and we were ordered back to work, which then generated the 2-week illegal strike. And we were successful in that strike because of the work we had done with the public and with parents ahead of time. The government had eventually to reach an agreement with us because the public was with us and it was not with the government. So that 5 years of work was paid off at that stage. I'll quickly just run through a few other things. We've had court challenges to have freedom of speech when they've tried to shut us down. And we took a case to the Supreme Court and won on the basis that the right to collective bargaining is guaranteed in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Canada. This is equivalent to your Bill of Rights, but it now protects collective bargaining rights as well through the courts. Communications with members were a key element to our success. We have been building the various social networking tools. We're now in a strike position again. We had a strike vote last week, the last week of school, and got a 90% support for that. So we'll be starting a strike in September when school starts again, but it's a teach-only strike. We will teach, we'll run extracurricular activities, but we won't have to do anything of the kinds of record keeping and et cetera. Many of our members said that's the kind of strike they'd like to be on for the rest of their career. And mobilization of the members is obviously the really key element. If you don't have the members really understanding and carrying a message to the community, to their neighbors, et cetera, then you don't have the kind of basis that you need. So I'll just quickly say the 5 things, and I'd be happy to talk to people about them later: communicating with the public, bargaining, court challenges, communication with members, and mobilization of members are the 5 kinds of areas of focus that we put on. I'd just like to finish though with international solidarity as a factor as well. We've been working with Mary Lou's and folks in Mexico for since 1993 in NAFTA in a Trinational Coalition. And when we were out on strike, our colleagues in Mexico set up a protest outside of the Canadian Embassy in Mexico City in support of teachers. And that was a real morale booster, and that's one of the things that international solidarity can do is support people, when they're in the struggle. The other thing they did, though, was that the courts were threatening to make us shut down our email and website. And the folks in Mexico created a website that we would be able to use to communicate with our members if the courts closed ours down. So it's both in symbolic and in very concrete ways. It's a very important aspect of keeping the morale of members up in that kind of situation. Thank you.
At war. On February 11th, our Governor Scott Walker declared war. He declared war on the working people of Wisconsin. He tried to, and so far has been successful in taking a state that in 1956 passed the first collective bargaining law for public employees and turned us into a right-to-work state with some of the most draconian aspects of any other state. We, as of now, he banned unions at the university level, child care level, and at the university hospital. He's prohibited collective bargaining in all areas for public employees, except the couple unions who supported him for political office, except for just a meager raise, 2% we can bargain about, but not even steps or how that is allocated. He has passed a law that will require us annual recertification of every union, every local, and you have to get 51% of the vote of the people who are eligible, not those who voted. And he has prohibited dues collection. As of 5 days ago, 40,000 of the 90,000 WEAC members, the Wisconsin Education Association members, don't have a contract, don't have any dues collection. We have to collect it individually. On top of that, he has cut dramatically public education funding and expanded the private school voucher program, which in Milwaukee is about the second largest school system in the state. No accountability, no evidence that they have succeeded. No, they don't service special needs kids, ELL kids, or kids who are hard to educate. We are under attack. Also, the craft of teaching is under attack. Milwaukee has been declared a die-fi school, and so we're under all the draconian requirements of Arnie. But Governor Walker didn't anticipate what was to happen. Now, let it be said that we on the left progressive side of things and our unions were not prepared. But something happened on the way to try to take away our rights, and that was the people stood up. Yep. With that, especially the Madison teachers, who for 4 days went on a political general strike, essentially, and they were the leaders. Teachers from around the state eventually joined ranks. When I say eventually, it took some time to convince people to come. And as you know, the rest is history. 50, 60, 70,000 people. The Democrats and the Senate felt strong enough that they could lead. You could see the relationship between mass street protests and effective parliamentary action. However, they didn't manage through a variety of means to pass the law. And now our struggle has moved into a different arena. Still street protests, but now we're going to do the largest recall in the history of this nation, when we are going to recall at least 3 of the conservatives and at least set up a goalie, as we say, in the state Senate. But our work is not at all over. We have to learn that we can't just mobilize, we have to organize. We have to combine various tactics of street demonstrations, political action, because elections do matter. We have to initiate a new sense in our union to develop activism. Several years ago, actually under the leadership of somebody here, Dennis Houlihan, former president, our union said that we're moving from a service to an organizing model, embracing the 3 frames of social justice, professionalism, industrial, but it takes a lot to move a union, even a local union, to that. It's easier to say that than to do that, and we're still in that process. We also learned that you have to name the enemy. We can't just pretend that they're out there, these bad people. There is an enemy. The corporate elite that in the 1980s deindustrialized our Midwestern cities by moving their companies and factories to the south, to overseas, by destroying the private sector unions, family-sustaining jobs. They are now doing the same in the public sector. They're trying to destroy the last vestiges of unionism in Wisconsin by attacking the public sector directly. And we have to call them for what they're doing. We also have to, when we organize, understand the strategic alliance between parents and community. And we're making steps, which I won't go into now, to do that. I'm going to close, because I know that I'm watching the time and I'm respectful of all the great speakers who are to follow and have preceded me, with something else, just a closing about teaching. You know, I've taught for 30 years. I've founded Rethinking Schools, which basically, we look at things through social justice and through the eyes of the classroom teacher. You know, we have our differences amongst ourselves in Rethinking Schools. We don't always agree with ourselves. I don't always agree with myself. But one thing what we have stressed that I think the unions haven't done enough of is something that Howard Zinn told me when I edited this book, which is available free of charge. Let's hear it for downstairs. But you should subscribe to Rethinking Schools. I said, what is the role that could teacher unions play in terms of promoting social justice? He says, if teacher unions want to be strong and well supported, it's essential that they not only be teacher unionists, but teachers of unionism. We need to create a generation of students who support teachers and the movement of teachers for their rights. And I would expand it, the people for their rights. And I want to thank Scott Walker, governor of Wisconsin, for reminding the teachers of Wisconsin that's necessary. Because when I was in Madison on State Street, looking down, I saw this police car coming up with lights. I thought, oh, those are the university students coming up, right on, university students. As they came closer, I realized it was every single student from West High School. High school students walked out en masse. And when the teachers went back to work because they knew they had to, the teachers said that the students continued to walk out in place of their teachers. We need to do that. We set up a site on the Rethinking Schools site about how to teach about the workers' rebellion and workers' history. I encourage you to add to that. I know many unions do that. And I'm going to close by reading a poem from one of my 5th grade students who is Native American in origin. She goes to our 2-way bilingual school, which thanks to Walker's budget is losing 1/3 of our staff. 1/3, and we're going to have more students next year. 1/3 of our teachers. I put on we talk a lot about politics in my classroom because I tell my students that we're going to study social movements of the past. We're going to learn about social movements of the future, currently, and you're going to decide in the future if you want to participate in social movements, because they're going to exist as long as human beings exist, because we're rooted in justice. And I had on my after recess writing assignment in the journal was just this prompt: what do the budget cuts mean to me? Edie wrote. She's a very shy girl, long hair. And I looked over, I asked if I could read, she said yes. I said, that's a great poem. She says, it's not a poem, it's a letter to the governor. I said I hope that she would share it, and she did, and she's shared it in different places, including the school board, and here it is. A letter to Governor Scott Walker. Budget cuts, an unfair mutiny that destroys the economy and slowly tears apart all humanity and makes the flaws of ourselves that much deeper, that much bigger, and that much more hurtful. It's hard to believe that all this circles around Governor Walker, the king of destroying schools and jobs. So congratulations, Scott. You've ruined kids' lives. Now isn't that a sport? Sincerely, just a student. P.S. Kids are the future. Frightened? Power to the people!
Last time I was here, I was at the AFT convention about 2 years ago. But before then, I was with some of the same colleagues in California. And I can tell you, this movement that I'm looking out at started with a few people around the conference table at UTO. And I want to say to you, we had the right idea then, and we got it now. Congratulations. My name is Nathan Saunders. I'm the president of the Washington Teachers Union in Washington, D.C. I've been told to make that clear. Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is my brother from the Puerto Rico, a colony itself. We are not a state, and we have some of the same pressures that you have, and I followed your struggles in Puerto Rico, and am always heartened to hear your voice about your issues. But we got a lot to do here today, and I'm so proud to be amongst you. I am a recent president and an activist, as one of the colleagues said to me from CORE. We used to be part of the rebel rousers, and now we the rebel, they say. But, nevertheless, it's a pleasure to be here. And I want to talk about, I received numerous requests to speak on from the group about different issues, and I think this is the one I'm finally speaking of, which is developing a proactive agenda and what we can do. And I want to give you some points. One point that has been stressed earlier, but I want to say it again, is that elections matter. Elections not only matter in your local, but elections matter in your city and in your state. If you are to be an effective union and an effective activist, you must understand the political nature in which we live and dwell in. Elections literally matter. In Washington, D.C., the Washington Teachers Union is influencing who gets elected to our city council and our state board of education. We also influence who became our mayor. And part of the speech that I was prepared to give, as I was requested on Life After Michelle Reed, many of you know Michelle Reed, but you right, you got that right. Yeah. But the truth of the matter is this. Let me tell you what Michelle Reed did. Much like Scott Walker, I'm very thankful for Michelle Reed, because she certainly helped me get elected president of the United States. But the reality is that with Michelle Reed, through her actions, her malice, her ill will towards teachers, what she did was, A, she got herself fired. B, she got the mayor who brought her to Washington, D.C. fired. And that is if I can leave you with one thing, that is what we're going to have to do. I've been in the teacher movement for a minute. I was elected 2 terms general vice president before I became president. And one of the things always amazed me, I had all of the field reps in the city under me for the teachers union. The people who love to fire hate to get fired. I was always been amazed by that. The ones who love to fire hate to get fired. When a teacher gets fired and the teacher's talking about the responsibility to house those payment children, principals don't care, don't give a hoot. But let them get fired. They want due process of the law. That's the first thing they want, is due process, and they want a good representative. So elections do matter. One of the second things we did was we also influenced the mayor's race. Vincent Gray, who disappointingly has not necessarily found himself as mayor, but when he was running, he was in real touch with the labor movement. But now that he's mayor, we're trying to help him get back in touch and rediscover himself. But nevertheless, what I'll say to you is that we also influenced the mayoral race in Washington, D.C. We donated money. We contributed labor. And that is what we're going to have to do to make changes in our respective towns and cities. We're going to have to contribute cash. We're going to also have to contribute labor in order to make sure. One of the things in Washington, we're a small city, folks talk about is that, well, the politicians tell me that, well, Nathan, your people live outside the city. They don't necessarily live in the city. And to them, I say this, as I've told them many times. My membership is the only group of individuals I know that for 10 months of the year deal with the most important aspects of voters in the District of Columbia, and that's their children. When my members teach their children, they got a telephone number to every single parent who happens to be a voter. And what I'm going to do for your election is encourage in your district the teachers to call all those parents and tell them what they really think of you as a politician. They soon discover that they want to think about us differently. Do not allow your enemy to disempower you. We are powerful because we make ourselves powerful. So the politics is very important. We brought on at the Washington Teachers Union a position known as a legislative and budget analyst position because I find in my experiences unions, teachers unions in particular, are not as adept as they should be on political and budgetary issues. We had a situation in Washington where a RIF was declared reduction in force, was declared by Michelle Reed. 1 month, she was missing $29 million. 30 days later, she had a budget surplus. 266 people were fired in the in-between time. And our union was taken aback because we did not understand or know the budget. I promised as president I would never allow that to happen. And therefore, we track the budget every single month and quarter. We want to know what you spent, who you spent it on, how you spent it. A lot of local school districts are getting involved in contracting, subcontracting out teacher-related activities. Whether they're paraprofessional, whether they're teacher jobs, they're going to private agencies, ignoring the union contracts, bringing in non-union folk to do work. Example, Teach for America. It's a contract. It's a contract. We've got many Teach for America teachers, some are very good. But the reality is that you can hire teachers through the normal HR function of the school system. You do not need to have an independent exterior contractor. So that's one of the things I recommend for locals to do. Get involved with your budget. Know your budget better than they do. Know your budget better than your chancellor or your superintendent. The next item that I will bring to your attention pertains to this. Putting a face on real teachers when the union prevails in court and in arbitration cases. If you listen to the major media, we look like a bunch of losers, but we are not. What I want you to do is in cases where you win, and we've had a couple lately, we've won $7.5 million back for teachers we brought back to work. We brought back all of our blind, visually impaired teachers. What Michelle Reed doesn't tell you is under her administration, she fired visually impaired teachers who taught visually impaired children. Wow. And guess what? Not only did I bring them back at a press conference when they came back, you need to let people know the success of the union. And you also, as you put a name to your enemy, you must also attack your enemy. Instead of being attacked, you must attack, and this is my last point. What we have done is we have attacked power. Power in Washington, D.C. is the Washington Post. We had a demonstration at the Washington Post. We attacked our enemy because the Washington Post produced numerous articles over years which clearly said that we were not good teachers, we were not good trade unionists, and we were the problem as opposed to the solution. We attacked our enemy. We must do that across the nation, and there's so many other things that we can and we will do together, but this conference is a perfect example, and I'd like to thank you for allowing me these few moments.
Translation for you. ¿Por qué estamos aquí? Estamos aquí no solo en solidaridad con ustedes, con su lucha, con su organización, sino porque su lucha es nuestra lucha.
We're here today not just in solidarity with you, but because your struggle is our struggle.
Si cierran una escuela en Chicago, nos afecta en México, o en Canadá, o en cualquier lugar del mundo. ¿Por qué? Porque la van a transformar en una escuela privada, en una charter school, porque individualizan la formación de los niños, porque quieren cambiar valores, porque quieren preparar solamente o educar para resolver pruebas, porque quieren que los niños solo piensen en conseguir un trabajo para ellos, pero no en transformar la sociedad y el mundo que los rodea.
If they close a school in Chicago, it affects us in Mexico, or in Canada, or in any place. Because what they're trying to do is compartmentalize us. They're trying to change our values. They're trying to teach our children to only solve tests, to only take tests, to only think about getting a good job. And they don't even think, and they're trying to stop us from trying to have a social or think about social transformation.
Defender la educación como derecho social es una lucha histórica. Por eso estamos aquí, porque lo entendemos. No se resuelve con que mejore una escuela. Defender la educación pública quiere decir que se transforme una escuela, que se mejore una escuela, pero también que se piense en el futuro, porque es no solo para nosotros, sino para nuestros hijos o para los hijos de nuestros hijos.
To defend education as a social right is a historic battle, is a historic fight. And it's not just about saving one school, it's about transforming us.
También es una lucha que rebasa fronteras. No es solo luchar en México o en Canadá o en Estados Unidos.
This is something that crosses borders. It's not just a fight here in Canada or in Mexico. It crosses and it supersedes borders.
¿Cómo nos hemos organizado para defender la educación pública? No hay recetas, no es como hacer un pastel. Depende de la cultura, de la historia, de la correlación de fuerzas. ¿Cómo lo hemos hecho? Luchando, generando ideas que recuperan y reflejan las necesidades de la mayoría de la población, del pueblo, pero también estudiando los problemas, generando ideas, iniciativas que se transforman en acciones, en hechos políticos. Necesitamos diagnósticos certeros que nos permitan hacer demandas específicas.
So how have we organized? There is no recipe. It's not like making a cake. It depends on the culture. It depends on your history. And it depends on the balance of forces. Fighting, that's important. Generating ideas that reflect the needs of the majority of the people. Studying problems, and also trying to brainstorm ideas and initiatives that are reflected in concrete political actions. What we need is an analysis of what's real and also very concrete demands.
Hoy, a nivel mundial, el ataque de las corporaciones y de los gobiernos no solo es para romper la organización de los trabajadores y las trabajadoras. No solo van sobre los sindicatos educativos, ahora quieren destruir la imagen de los maestros y de las maestras. Quieren destruir lo que es ser maestro o maestra. Quieren convertirnos en entrenadores, no en educadores.
This international attack isn't just against individual unions. It's actually trying to break our notion of ourselves as educators. It's trying to accuse us of being responsible for poor education. And it's trying to actually take away our right to be educational leaders.
La lucha por la defensa de la educación hoy también es una lucha por elaboración de alternativas pedagógicas. No basta la resistencia. Tenemos los trabajadores de la educación que tener claro que nuestra lucha no puede ser una lucha gremial, es decir, no basta con tener un buen contrato colectivo de trabajo, no basta con tener buenos salarios y tener buenas condiciones de trabajo. Tenemos que pensar en que trabajamos en la educación, en el sentido de la educación, en que lo que hacemos es para transformar a la sociedad en su conjunto. Eso es lo que está en disputa hoy.
So the fight for education today isn't just in our specific sectors. It's not just for better salaries. It's actually for transforming education and our right to be the leaders in transforming education.
La situación en México es muy difícil, muy compleja. Tenemos una crisis terrible, porque además, si a ustedes les da catarro, gripe, en México nos da pulmonía.
The situation in Mexico, we have an economic crisis, but if you get a cold, we get pneumonia.
Tenemos una situación política de una gran ilegitimidad del gobierno. Hay una violencia terrible en el país y están militarizando con el combate al narcotráfico, preparándose para que si hay protestas sociales puedan usar al ejército en las calles.
We have an illegitimate government, we have a high level of violence in our government, and we also have a militarized state where the army can be used against us if needed.
Nuestra educación, por mandato constitucional, porque se ganó en la Revolución Mexicana, es un sistema federal, gratuito, laico, obligatorio, desde educación preescolar hasta la universidad.
Our education is one of the great gains of the Mexican Revolution. It's a federal system, it's free, it's public, it's non-religious, and it's obligatory. This is from basic school, from primary, all the way through the university.
Existe un sindicato nacional de trabajadores de la educación, que es un sindicato en donde su dirección es totalmente oficialista. No solo apoya al gobierno, es un grupo político muy poderoso, no solo apoya al gobierno, sino que promueve todas las reformas educativas neoliberales.
The National and Official Union of Teachers is very powerful. It's very aligned with the government, and it in fact supports all of the neoliberal initiatives of the government with regards to educational reform.
Pero desde hace 30 años hay un movimiento democratizador, el de la Coordinadora Nacional de Trabajadores de la Educación.
But for the last 30 years, we have had a movement called the Coordinadora, which is a movement for a democratic and independent mobilization.
Por eso ustedes han conocido las luchas de los maestros de Oaxaca, de Chiapas, de Michoacán, del Distrito Federal, en donde se pelea por democracia sindical, pero por defensa de la educación pública.
And for that reason, that's why we have seen the resurgence of struggles in Chiapas, in Michoacán, en Oaxaca, y en in Mexico City. Yeah.
Hoy el desafío es que enfrentamos una tercera generación de reformas educativas neoliberales. Tenemos una plaga, es una plaga, como pirañas, como cucarachas, que son las pruebas estandarizadas.
Okay, there's a third initiative, and it's a plague. It's like piranhas. It's like cockroaches. It's the standardized tests.
Ahora, las pruebas estandarizadas se convierten en el elemento que define no solo los rankings para decir qué escuela es mejor o qué maestro es mejor, sino también se usan para determinar una parte del salario de los profesores.
Well, this sounds really familiar. These standardized tests are used to rank and sort schools so that you know what are the bad ones and what are the good ones, but they're also being used to determine how much pay a teacher will get.
Hay una gran resistencia, hay movilizaciones, hay paros, que son huelgas, campañas con padres de familia, hacemos talleres, participamos, por supuesto, en redes sociales internacionales, como la Red Social para la Educación Pública en las Américas, como la Coalición Trinacional en Defensa de la Educación Pública. Tenemos un taller en la tarde y tenemos revistas que también podemos circular, unas en español y tal vez Larry trajo en inglés otras.
So the work that we do is we try to articulate alternatives. We try to support all of the resistance, demonstrations, strikes, campaigns with parents, also workshops. We hold workshops and we participate in networks where we can, including the Trinational Conference. We also publish magazines such as Intercambio, and there's going to be a workshop this afternoon, and we'll be talking about the Trinational Coalition.
Finalmente, luchar en México es peligroso. No solo se puede perder el trabajo, también se puede perder la vida, puede el gobierno encarcelar, desaparecer maestros o asesinarlos.
To struggle in Mexico, it's not just a risk of losing your job. You could lose your life. You could be imprisoned. You could be disappeared or murdered.
Ustedes, nosotros, somos parte de un gran movimiento democratizador de la educación pública que buscamos que los sindicatos puedan ejercer su poder. Los maestros somos peligrosos para quienes gobiernan el mundo, porque somos líderes sociales.
We're part of a great movement.
Some things about that. As Ingrid said, I come out of PEAK, Progressive Educators for Action, and United Teachers Los Angeles, where I've been on the E-Board, our board of directors, for the last 3 years. And we've got an ongoing significant electoral success, as well as some losses in UTLA. We've got 4 out of 7 officers that are PEAK endorsed folks and people that work with us, 3 of whom are here today, Brother Juan and Sisters MJ and Arlene. Glad to be here with them. Many E-Board members that we won in the last election. But at the same time, and what I think we need to focus on today, our work is in building an independent rank and file group, and that's still in its early stages. So I'm honored to be on a panel with progressive leaders and activists who are part of what I consider a growing insurgency, not just against our ruling class, political leaders and politicians like, well, Michelle Rhee or whoever it is, but against leaderships, some of our own union leaderships who for too long have given up without a fight. And looking around this room and knowing how many more people back home we represent, those leaderships and the politicians that they often apologize for need to hear footsteps, because these are some very loud footsteps that are beginning to develop. And it's not just because we can win office, and we can, obviously, but because, even more importantly, our politics, I think, are going to lead the largest rank-and-file upsurge and insurgency that the U.S. labor movement has seen in decades. And I think we're starting to get a sense of that. In LA, we've got some serious challenges, and I'm just going to briefly touch on a few. And I like, after Wisconsin, thinking about those challenges more as provocations, and that's what they are. It's more than our share of attacks. Layoffs, which I think are far ahead in LA of where they are in some other places, and the class size increases that are inseparable from layoffs, charter takeovers and privatization, surreal union busting lawsuits. We'll be able to talk about some of the specifics in the breakouts. But what I think that we really need to talk a lot about today is what exactly is it going to take to stop them? What's it going to take to really stop these attacks? One answer is that it's going to take a massive fight. That's very clear. And we've got an amazing glimpse of what that could look like in Wisconsin recently. And we owe everyone who led and participated in that struggle a huge debt of gratitude. And the struggle was led in many respects by the rank and file in a way that was quite unexpected. Wisconsin also gives us, and I don't think this lesson is generalized enough around the country, a real taste of what it would look like to win. I think a lot of the people who were in Wisconsin knew that we might have been able to win this struggle. This is the kind of fight that it's going to take. But to be perfectly honest, and that's absolutely what we need to be if we want to win, this is a period in which we're waging some hard fights and still losing ground. And in some cases losing ground very rapidly and very significantly. To take UTLA, we desperately need to transform our union organization because it's absolutely not designed for what we face right now. I mean, people could talk about their specific locals, but UTLA was designed, for some episodic fightbacks. We had a somewhat successful, actually very memorable strike in 1989. Didn't involve what a strike would need to involve today, and largely our staff spends its time servicing members and grievances, much or many of which would be better fought out as struggles to build site-based power at the sites. And they don't spend their time on organizing. So for one thing, we need, and someone, at least one other speaker mentioned it, we need to move from a service model of unionism to an organizing union. And that involves everything from having an organizing department, which I'd love to hear more about how that works in Chicago, real political research, especially member training and political development, and the building of site-based power, some of which can come from the top of the union that leaders can take initiatives around, but most of which is going to come from below. In LA, we're already putting up, I would say, a good fight, but it's not in many cases a winning fight. One of our schools, Clay Middle School, was simply given away to Green Dot Charters, and there's an important community-based fight, and this is where our community partners come in to fight back to take that school back. But generally, we've had rallies, including a very important one at the LA Times, school site picketing, a big citywide chapter chair meeting, punctuated by cries of strike, strike, strike. I mean, the militancy is there, but when it came down to trying to build a 1-hour strike in the midst of the RIF crisis that we faced several months ago, it wasn't that the leadership was the main roadblock to having that. It was that many of our leading seeming militants, some of our key members and the people that they represent, weren't ready to take the risk of having even a 1-hour strike in the face of a fairly draconian temporary restraining order threat that echoed something that we had several years ago. So what I want to finish on is that our success relies on our ability, I think, to integrate fight back tactics with, as a number of people have already mentioned, Nathan touched on this, a strategy that involves front and center our vision for reform. I think that's controversial, and it's one reason I hope we debate it today. It's understandably controversial, especially with many of our most militant activists. Why is that? I mean, we're aware that this is in the context of our national affiliates dancing with the anti-union reform devil. I mean, it's very easy to talk about reform and have that be hijacked by people who talk about fake reform specifically for the purposes of destroying not just the teacher union movement, but the labor movement in general in the United States. So to finish, I think our member engagement requires that we have a meaningful strategy for participation. It may mean organizing charter schools, but it also means opposing them on the basis of their failure to educate children and replacing that with a vision that comes from us about what educating children really looks like. We in LA have developed a very detailed version of our own evaluation and support plan. I mean, they have a punitive and VAM value-added idea of what evaluation should look like. We need to come back with what a real model should be. We're developing a reform committee in the union and taking many other initiatives that link our fight back to reform, because one danger today, whether progressives are in power in our locals or not, even if we control our locals, is that that's not going to be enough. We have to engage members and the public around a vision of what schools should look like that motivates them to get involved and stay involved. And so what a winning strategy needs, formal leadership can, in many key cases, play a decisive role, as we all know. It's not the basis of our power. And as Wisconsin shows, huge struggles can erupt without conscious preparation.
And our brother from LA just said, we have a parent organization that's not quite ready or has chosen to do something else. How do we deal with this? How do we focus on this? And how do we take the next steps? The fact is, in Chicago, it has been rank and file membership that has made the difference. It's been the relationships with our community partners that has made the difference. And building the relationships with our students' parents. That's what's going to make the difference. So if union leaders sit around and have great ideas and great ideology, but there's no mechanism to reach out to the rank and file who, as we know, are sitting in fear. They've done a great job. The shock doctrine is here. Shocking off is here. way to go. They know that it feels bad. It feels bad to be scapegoated for policies they did not create. Oh yeah. It feels bad to be told you are the reason our state is broke. And because our state is broke, we're going to take the opportunity now to get rid of everything that has protected teachers for over 100 years. Everything. It means that we are going to define what an evaluation looks like. And as David said, we're looking at punitive, gotcha evaluations. But the part that is so frustrating about this process is the fact that people will lie to you in your face and say, oh, this isn't about that. We're wanting to improve education. We want to improve the outcomes. John F. Kennedy, as some of us are old enough to remember, said that the real decisions that get made about untruths are not an outright lie, but the myth. The myth that is constant and unchallengeable and unrealistic. Now I'm paraphrasing. But if you think about that, what myths are we fighting now? We're fighting the myth of the excellent second-year teacher, and it's always the second-year teacher. It's never the first-year teacher, it's never the fourth or fifth-year teacher, it is always the second-year teacher who is wrongly terminated because of seniority, okay? We are fighting the myth of data. It's fine to use data when it suits your agenda. This past week, test scores in Chicago went up. Where was the great, oh my God, what a wonderful job teachers are doing in Chicago? Where was that coverage in the press? It was non-existent. The new CEO said, oh, well, it's not just people meeting standards. We need to move the number that exceeds the standard. Oh, yeah, that's it. But by the way, did the teachers who were responsible for the low test scores, are they responsible for the high test scores? The evaluation system is broken because too many people receive superior and excellent ratings. But the evaluation system is right when somebody gets an unsatisfactory. The principals in Chicago control the hiring. So when we lay off because of economic reasons, if they want to hire somebody fresh off the street, that's their prerogative. But on the other hand, when a tenured teacher comes to apply for that same position, if there's a secret do not hire on their transcripts, on their work files, on the personnel files, then that other principal who has the hiring can't hire. So which is it? We are faced with constant lies, untruths, and myths. And until we scale those heights, and the only way we can do it is with our rank and file brothers and sisters, with our community partners, and with our parents. And what's really interesting is, slowly but surely, they're starting to come forward. And then what does the other people that are supposedly in charge do? They find their sets of parents. We can't afford to buy parents. We have to have real relationships. That's what we do. because no matter how many wins we get, we're always going to have a bunch of losses. It's not the losses, it's how you deal with the losses. It's also having a very realistic vision of where you can go, how you can get there, and moving forward. And it's never giving up. You're going to get setbacks, but you have to pick yourself up, dust yourself off. Be prepared for your brothers and sisters in your building. So when you say, come on, you turn around, they're not behind you. That's okay. Don't be angry with them yet. Don't be angry with them yet. Because if they're not with you yet, it's because you haven't done what you needed to do to explain it to them for the reasons they need to be behind you. But don't be angry with your brothers and sisters. When your brothers and sisters blame you for everything, and they will, don't be angry with them. Keep moving forward. And what you need to start doing is making the alliances that we have right here. Everyone that's sitting by somebody you know, we should move up right now and change seats and start talking right here to people that are from someplace else. That's how this goes. You get support, you get nurturing, because you're going to get smacked down. And your biggest critics are going to be your friends, as they should be. But you have to remind them also, we are in this together. We are fighting a national struggle, and the forces arrayed against us are well-funded, well-organized, and relentless because they want to destroy labor in America, and the easiest way to do it is with teachers. It's the easiest way. So, I would leave you, what's that, tell me how much time I have? Oh, 10. All right, sorry. It said 10. I guess I'm done. Brothers and sisters, thank you so much for taking time to come to Chicago.